Morning, everyone. I just got a message from Lynn saying we were going to start. So I really want to welcome everybody for being here on this gloomy, cloudy day. You might have preferred to stay someplace nice and cozy. Hopefully you are someplace nice and cozy anyway, but we really appreciate you coming this morning. My name is Annika Larson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a teacher at Wellstone Elementary. And I'm also the chair of SPFE COPE. So I'm here today to welcome you to our school board candidate forum that's been specifically focused on student outcomes, focused governance, and as well as what type of leadership we want to see from the school board, especially around community engagement and the other important issues that are in front of our schools right now. So again, welcome. Thank you for coming this morning. The members of SPFE COPE are going to introduce ourselves. And right now I'm going to pass it over to Mercedes, who is going to be our MC for today.
Hi, everyone. I'll start by introducing myself and then the other COPE folks can. Like Annika mentioned, my name is Mercedes Lee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a EL teacher at American Indian Magnet and super excited to have some of our school board candidates here with us today and have a chance to talk with all of you all. I'll pass to Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah Bush. I'm a member of SPFE COPE. I teach at Horace Mann Elementary. I'm a K-5 science teacher, and I will pass to Lolly.
Hi there, I'm Lolly. I use she, her pronouns. I am a secondary specialist at Murray Middle School and a member of COPE. And I am going to pass to, who else we got here? I'll pass over to Lynn, I guess. Lynn's got the master on this.
Hey everybody, my name's Lynn Bolton. I am the political organizer for St. Paul Federation of Educators. I am also your tech guru for today. So I will be making sure, hopefully, we don't have any problems. I am going to pass it over to Laurel.
Hi, I'm Laurel Kuhner Bear Care. My pronouns are she and her. I am a math intervention teacher at American Indian Magnet.
And then we are super fortunate this morning to have a current board member here with us. So I will let him introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Uriah Ward. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the treasurer of the school board.
And then if the candidates could introduce themselves, we'll start with Carlo.
Cool. Good morning. Thank you for having me sharing space. I'm Carlo Franco, he, him pronouns. Excited to be here.
Yusuf.
Hi, everybody. My name is Yusuf Carrillo. I'm very excited to be here. I use he, him pronouns, and yeah, I'm excited, first of all, to get to know you and to also be able to speak. So thank you for the opportunity.
And Erica.
Good morning, everybody. Erica Valiant, candidate, parents of children in the district at Benjamin E. Mays and Maxfield Elementary and Hidden River with nieces and nephews at Central and Murray Middle School, and a 21-year-old who just turned 21 who graduated from Central in 2020 when the graduation was a slash show and lawn sign. So hey, I'm excited to be here and meet everybody. I've been with the district for a long time as a parent, and yeah, that's me.
Thank you everyone so much for being here. We are going to get started. So how it's going to work is we're going to have, it'll kind of be like a roundtable discussion where each of the candidates will get to talk about the topic question that I present. What we'll do is it won't be timed per candidate. And so we kind of have a layout of we'll start with the first question and then about 15 minutes later, we'll move on to the second one, and that's kind of how it'll go. But we just want to make sure the candidates have a chance to share everything with us. So yeah, we will get started. Our first question for this morning, and please, whoever feels moved to speak first, do so.
Mercedes.
Oh, yes.
Uriah is going to give us an update on SOFG first.
Yes. Okay. That's my Saturday morning break. I'm sorry, Uriah. please.
Yeah, no worries at all. Cool. So hey everyone. As y'all I probably know, the school board has been considering student outcomes focused governance as a framework for how we do our work, and that's something that we've been considering for a while now. We've had a number of discussions about it, and there were like some concerns raised about what this would mean for how we engage with the public and what sort of issues we tackle as board members. At our last committee, the board meeting on Tuesday, we had a very long conversation where we went through like the rubric, like line by line, and talked about whether or not each line made sense for us, and sort of like had like a really thorough and thoughtful debate. And what we ended up coming away with was a heavily amended framework that got rid of a lot of the things that I'd been concerned about and a lot of I think y'all have been concerned about. And we agreed to attempt to go to the Council of Great City Schools and see if they'd be willing to move forward with an amended framework. We have just heard in the last couple of days that it seems like they are not willing to move forward with an amended framework. But it does seem as if they are willing to move forward with a contract for only part of the service and not the whole service. And what that could end up looking like would be a contract to assist the board with doing outreach and creation around goals and guardrails only, and then none of the coaching on the restrictive pieces of SOFG that would limit how the board tries to hold the district accountable and how we interact with our community and try and bring community into the process moving forward. And because this is sort of like a weird new sort of potential pathway, it seems as if the vote on SOFG is going to be pushed out a month. So we had been building up toward a vote on this next Tuesday at our BOE meeting. As far as I can tell, that's no longer going to happen. And we are going to be talking about this new version of what the contract could look like at May's COB meeting and then potentially voting at May's BOE meeting. So that's sort of like a big change to the way the conversation has gone, and one that I think is potentially really exciting because it moves away from, again, these restrictive pieces that would make it harder for the board to hold the district accountable. And someone had asked me to mention like how much this whole thing would cost. I believe it's $4,000 a quarter for 3 quarters of this year. So that'll be $12,000 through the end of this year. And I'm not sure how much it would cost for next year. That information wasn't given to us at the last COB meeting. If anyone has any questions about it, feel to message me directly in the chat or send me an email to my school board email address.
Uriah, could you explain a little bit about the guardrails or expound on that a little more?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So whenever we set goals, the way that SOFG wants us to do it is to do things that SOFG defines as like student outcomes only. So it's a fairly narrow like realm of things that we can do as goals. And it's basically saying that we want as a district to do these things. The guardrails are how we say, we want to get to these goals, but you can't do this, right? So, it could be something along the lines of, we have to hit like this. The goal could be something around literacy. We have to get to this certain benchmark. And then the guardrail could be, okay, well, we want to do that. But as you try and get there, you cannot, like move staffing away from this area to achieve that goal or something like that.
Thank you so much. So we are going to now get started with our first question. And then Lynn will also be posting the questions in the chat, so feel free to check there if you want to refer back to it. The first question is, the current board has determined that SPPS needs to set goals centered on student outcomes. What goals would you like to see set, and what would you include when talking about student outcomes?
I guess I'll start talking, and then we can go on a conversational mode. One of the things that hit me about the whole SOFG process was initially the restrictions that were included in there, and to a certain degree the narrow definition of outcomes that was listed, specifically almost in a very, very metric way, saying this is the only thing we can call success in a district. I think for many, many years, our district, as well as many other districts, have had outcomes and have had goals. So it's not something new to us to be able to be understanding that we want our kids to be able to read at a certain level, comprehend what they're reading, have, critical math skills, be able to think critically, to encourage their creativity, and to engage and to have them engage in the community in many different activities. Maybe the question that I have, or the goal that I would like to see, is actually more overarching and overreaching, which is how can we change our environment to make these goals happen? Because we've all have these goals. We share the ideals of wanting our kids to do better. That's something that unfortunately sometimes has been thrusted upon us as like, oh, well, you don't care about student goals. You only care about, adult issues. And the truth is we all care about student goals. That I think is a little bit of a misnomer. We actually need to focus on these, but how do we get there? And my thought is we actually need to make our district safe. And I emphasize safe, not in the sense of like just the narrow definition of school safety of like, metal detectors or things like that. No, I'm talking about relationships. Our administration, our board, our school admins, our teaching community, our parents, we all need to experience safety in the relationships. The fact that a student can go to a school and feel like, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to, avoid such a person, or avoid bullying, or avoid racial discrimination. Or a teacher can go to a school and feel safe, in themselves, and safe from their administration. And I think there's a lot of work that we have to do around setting goals of creating outcomes that respect and protect us from our worst behaviors. And unfortunately, I think in the past we've experienced really, really tough. How would I call it? Tough. I would say really damaging and violent words from our administration that have really hurt us as educators. And as a board, we need to change that. It should no longer be something that we go down that path. So I encourage you to think about that. I don't know. I would like to hear other board members as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I will first just say there are certainly there's certainly a benefit to looking at what goals we're setting at the district level, right? Like, I think like we have to be a part of that as the board. We have to partner with community. I know that gets a little bit, later in our conversation that we're going to talk a little bit more about that. However, I think that like what I have been spending a lot of time talking with, family members, young people, and other community members who have had young people in our district, educators, etc., is that we at St. Paul Public Schools have young people within our infrastructure for 13 years plus of their life, right? And I think we have to really be looking at outcomes that are really setting young people up for success outside of the 13 years that we have with them. And I think that starts right really early, making sure that they get the foundational skills, like the reading and the math and the being able to write. By third grade, and making sure that that is that we're influxing resources within that space to ensure that there's enough resources for individualized support for the young folks that need to be pulled up to that level. I would say there's a lot of things that I have been thinking about in terms of like specific goals and outcomes that I would like to see. My current day job, I get to connect young people to internships and career pathways during the summer. And so like I spend a lot of my time thinking about what are career pathways, what are we setting young people up for a sustainable, high wage, high in demand job as when they leave our space, right? And what education and what research has to go into that. Financial empowerment, like the basic skills of just like living in community and making sure that our young people have access to like really building wealth justice, right? And like, recognizing that our young folks come from all sorts of different backgrounds and experiences, and making sure that as an infrastructure, as an institution, that we are really, you know, ensuring that we're preparing them again for life outside of the 13 plus years that we have them in our spaces. And so looking at that through a financial trauma lens, processing how can we build assets, build wealth, and build skill sets that are going to be transferable into different spaces. I would also say that a goal that I look at as it relates to the district and student outcomes, I think like really assessing like why folks are leaving the district, potentially, right, like in stabilizing that enrollment, setting goals around student enrollment and retention, I think is really critical. As it relates to like our overall district outcomes, but again, our individual student outcomes, if we start digging into some of those reasons, we may be able to, you know, partner even stronger and be able to adapt the way that we move forward in the district. But then the last thing I'll say on this, and then I'll pass it over to Erica. But I think the big thing that we also have to recognize is that outcomes as it relates to their educational performance in some spaces, we also have to look at like kind of the whole community in recognizing that a lot of outcomes are also associated with some of the symptoms of poverty that, you know, that some of our folks are living in, right? Like how do we look at putting in, you know, some goals about how do we, you know, streamline our budget and partner stronger with community-based agencies that are actually providing the wraparound services that young people and their families need in order to be successful, like, right, like the healthy nutritional food and actually having food in their home, being able to make sure that we can stabilize what housing looks like in our community, so that way our families don't have to continuously move around our entire city and go to other cities and then come back, and just like really stabilizing and building up that community. And then that will also, of course, contribute to the positive, thriving schools that we need. And so I'll pause there and I'll pass it on over to Erica.
All right, good morning. So I don't think that I've heard anything that I disagree with yet, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. But what I will say is that in regards to goals, and if we're going to have goals centered around student outcomes, that means you're going to be setting the outcomes first, and then based on what outcomes you want, then you have to figure out what the goals are, right? Because that's going to be centered around the outcomes. That's what that says to me. So some of the goals I would like to see set are you know, of course, engaging as in reflective and critical thinking practices, and making sure that we are committed to inclusive schools, and ensure that we've got, I want to say, anti-racist education, and or that we are acknowledging that the system of racism still exists and that it's embedded in all the systems that we use right now. That's not to say that anybody is a racist, but just understanding that the basis of what our systems were built on, that it's embedded, right? And then we have to be very intentional about understanding, recognizing, and figuring out like where those things exist and how they're affecting our children and families in the school system and outside the school system, because those things are not separate, right? Kids come to school with their whole selves, whether you want to or not, and that includes everything that's going on outside of school, right? And you don't get kids without parents or caregivers or whatever environment it is that they live in outside of the building. They bring it there, and that's not something that they can not do, you know? What else? Engaging in authentic experiences with all our stakeholders, so that includes the kids, families, colleagues, the community, to develop collaborative practices, both inside and outside the classroom, that cultivate equitable and socially just learning environments. So again, that goes back to the idea of the school doesn't exist in a vacuum. The kids don't exist in a vacuum. The staff don't exist in a vacuum, right? So when we're talking about not just engagement, but what we're learning, what the kids are learning, how they're learning it, how they're receiving it, right, and how they're able to like practice what it is that they receive. You know, we have to make sure that we are taking into account like all of the things that come with it. There are so many things on top of the babies that they come to school with, and you know, we can create all the outcomes we want, right, on paper, and all the things that we would ideally like to happen and see, but at the same time, we have to be realistic and understand that you know, everything doesn't fit everybody, to put it in a nutshell, right? So I did look at the what is it? The rubric, I guess, for the what the board is looking at, and it, you know, it reminded me of like the IDI a little bit, and also reminded me of the progress reports too that I can come out where we're like it's mastery and not meeting, and the thing that is the thing that I would just like to say about that in general is that it's always nice to have something that is a container for what you want to do, but you have to make sure that it's flexible. You have to make sure that it's permeable to a certain extent, right? Because if you don't, then you're gonna suffocate what it is that you're trying to do with restrictions. So I'm glad to hear that the board was talking about amending what it looked like. I would not personally think that I would want to take it as is, because I do think it's also too restrictive. So I don't know if I went off subject a little bit, but that's all I get right now.
Thank you. I would just like to echo what you said about SOFG. You know, I've had concerns about it for a while. And I think, you know, in talking to, you know, in full transparency, my wife is an educator at Wellstone Elementary. She teaches EL for kindergartners and first graders. And one of the things that we were talking about was the nature of SOFG. And it came to me that the idea of SOFG really is, without good behaviors behind it, it's just another initiative that we can get lost in as a board or as a district, you know, and it could become another shackle that we put on ourselves, you know, on the path to some definition of success. And I think we need to keep an open mind, like you said, Erica, about the flexibility. That's a huge component. And what better way to be flexible than to listen to the people who are actually having to make those goals real, which is our educators. We literally can't do this without our educators. And that's one of the things that I think people have a hard time, you know, marrying the two things together of you know, district and teachers. It's not district and teachers living in two different you know, in two different bubbles. We're all one community. And the sooner that we can as a board really and have that percolate down to our administration, that you really don't exist without the teachers. There's no work to be done here without teachers. We need to work together in a very symbiotic way to be able to make these goals happen. SOFG ultimately is just some guidelines. That's it. The real work is us. Like, we're the ones who are going to have to transform ourselves to be listeners instead of, you know, imposers.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Our next question In order to set goals for student outcomes, robust engagement with community is necessary, which all of you have talked about so far. Traditionally, SPPS has not done engagement well. They either dictate through a top-down structure or don't include recommendations from community. What are your thoughts on how engagement can be done to be more inclusive? And how do you make sure that multiple voices are heard, not just the same ones? Who should have the final say in identifying these goals?
I'll jump in just quickly, but I think, so I will just share a little bit. So like my background is in community work. I've worked as a restorative practices coordinator at Humboldt High School. I'm a Humboldt High School graduate. So just have been in community for a long time. I would say volunteering in community, and like my direct jobs has a lot of times been organizing in community, whether that's youth programming and whatnot. And so I will say that what I think sometimes comes out is like a cookie cutter approach to what engagement looks like. And we know that every single community within St. Paul is different, right? Like we do say like small St. Paul as like a way to say like there's tons of connections and similarities, but there's still so many unique opportunities in every single different community within the city of St. Paul. So like really being able to like assess what school-based approaches are happening within our district. I think that there are some folks within our buildings, our educators, our non-licensed folks, our bilingual EAs who do outreach and engagement very well, particularly to the folks that are speaking English as a second language. And so I think like really leaning into their expertise and partnering with them to craft what the outcomes are, what the engagement processes look like. And it doesn't have to necessarily come from even a school-based administrator, right? Like I think leaning in to the experts that have that engagement. I think our educators in those spaces, they are consistently communicating with families. That is something that we have to tap into even more to ensure that like we're bringing that back and we're actually able to influence the way that we do that then across the district. I will say that there's other strategies that we could utilize, like actually like going to meet the families where they're at, right? Like having, cookouts and barbecues in like different housing neighborhoods, right? Like where there's, heavy concentration of our SPPS students, like bringing the engagement to them in a way that is not just a survey, because I know that surveys are not effective and not everybody responds to those surveys, right? And so like really thinking about ways to have direct conversation. And to this point, I will also say that really prioritizing the folks that like are not showing up in the surveys, right? Like if the surveys are working for groups of our families, like, right, we can continue to utilize that to continue to solicit that feedback. However, for the families that are not participating in that process, I think it's important that we actually, meet them, go out and figure out why they're not coming. If that means, doing home visits, going out, again, being at the park near their home. These are all opportunities that I think we can tap into. And I would also say building tangible and actually like partnered relationships with specific community organizations. I look at like KOM, who are actually doing some case management in our building for our Karen community. And like that is a trusted agency. There's leadership in that community. And there's of course lots and lots of others, right? But I think a lot of times we default to what's easy and we go back to the agencies that we have been working in partnership with forever, but we haven't really broadened that out. And to the last point on that, I will just say, that I think that there's a way to look at how we're really investing in community engagement and community outreach. I'm fairly certain, and if I'm wrong on the statistic, I would love somebody to correct me, but I'm pretty sure in the last budget report or budget update, the general fund, it says there's 12% of administration, or 12% of the budget that goes to administration. And just looking at how we could maybe look at that number a little differently to make sure that there's maybe some more discretionary funds that could go out to community engagement within our buildings for our educators, particularly our TAs that are only, TAs, EAs that are, at 32 to 37 hours a week. And how can we maybe give them a little bump on, the number of hours that they could potentially work outside of the school day to go at the community center and have conversations with families, but really tapping into the folks that are doing this work, that are helping our communities really, really move forward, and thinking outside the box of ways that we can compensate those folks that have good relationship already to go out and continue that work outside of there. And sorry, I did say that was the last point, but the last point that I will say is that I think the community the board, it's critical that the board does partners with community, families, educators all the time, right? Like, we need to know what's going on. And I know that's part of another conversation that we'll have during this time. But I do think the board has to be critical in the way that we kind of have that final approval in the goals that we set, because but that only works if we are in that community, in that partnership, and part of the outreach and engagement work, so we have a good citywide view on what the needs are. So the board should do that in the direction and direct that work down to the superintendent's administration, and then follow up to make sure that those goals are happening. So I'll pause.
Hi, I'm just going to jump in. Sorry, I got here a little bit late. So I don't see any other.
Are you muted?
Oh, so I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Suze, we're not taking questions from the chat.
Okay, gotcha.
I was gonna offer Erica if you want to go first, and I can, yeah.
Thanks for offering. All right, so I'm gonna make this kind of short. I think I'm not good at making it short, but I'm gonna try. So focusing on equitable community engagement. So that looks like an ongoing two-way process of building relationships, working collaboratively to support students and parents and sharing power, and with a focus on sharing power. And what does that look like? Because when you engage with the community, and then you, I think what happens a lot of times is that it feels and becomes extractive, right? And what's missing typically is, if we're asking you for your feedback, for your time, for your work, to get this feedback and everything, what is the partnership that comes with it? What does sharing power look like? Is this simply extractive, right? Are you treating us like just research? Or do you actually want us to be partners in this with you, like you say you do when we talk to you at our conferences? Hey, we're partners in this. We're both working for the best interest of the child. But when it comes to things that the district and or board discusses at a higher level, then that partnership kind of fizzles out, right? That's what it feels like. So what does sharing power really look like? So that means there's an intentional and accessible feedback loop, right? Number one, that's one of the things that has to happen. That's one of the things that have to be prioritized. Multiple modes of engagement, like Carlo mentioned. Who are we missing? Why are we missing them, right? How can we be intentional about figuring out how to engage those people, and how do we prioritize that engagement with dollars, right? Because if we don't prioritize it with dollars, then it doesn't get prioritized 9 times out of 10. And as far as who has the final say, I think that is, I don't know if I have the answer for that right away. I don't want to make, I want to say that it depends on, I guess, how you kind of set up the engagement model. So it's like, are you setting up engagement and then collecting, and are you doing this process? And then do you take that back and then get with another group of community members and staff members or district members, and then pare it down, and then you decide as a group maybe that includes a few of all of the stakeholders, including students, and then that group has the final say on the goal, right? So that's how I would prefer to do it. unless there's a time crunch, you know how that is. But I would prefer for the final say to be had by a group that includes all stakeholders, right? Or a representation of all the stakeholders. And then I think the other thing to think about is, and I'm not sure it's directly related to this question, but it kind of is in a way, when we're talking about student outcomes, is what are the outcomes geared at? Are we looking at student outcomes based on the workforce, based on forecasts from the large corporations that hire? Or are we looking at outcomes based on the children being lifelong learners and possibly entrepreneurs, or just doing something completely different? Because all those things make a difference. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would like to acknowledge, first of all, is that and you've all experienced this, I think, in board meetings, is our district, unfortunately, is very good at making a policy, throwing it in front of people really quickly, and then making them react. And normally our reaction whenever we're thrusted with such an immediate thing is one of shock and stress. And then when we react with shock and stress, we're told we're being dramatic. We've all experienced this. I think even when I was part of the board as an interim, I would go to the district meetings, with a sense of dread of like, what is the next bomb that's going to blow up in my face? And it wasn't a bomb from a community member. These were things that were happening internally at the admin level. So I think there's a question that links to the last question, is who has the final say? Unfortunately, right now the final say is coming from the administration. We need to change that. The board does have rights through the Minnesota statutes of directing and administering the business of the school district. The question is, how are we going to do that? Because we could create, if we wanted to as a community, a board that is super strong and does everything internally, but that's not transparent and that's not ultimately effective for our community. What our community needs is for us to go out to them. And I think Carlo and Erica mentioned, different components of that. I wholly agree with them on the idea of reaching out to community organizations, leaning on their expertise, leaning on the expertise of students, parents, community members. I think that the board needs to create a cadence and actually change the location of the meetings. We need to be able to fund technology so that we can have open meetings at multiple locations. So we're going to parents, not them to us. And I've seen the room at 360. I know people come in there, they make a great effort to come into this place that people say, oh, it's centrally located. It's not centrally located to somebody who's on the east side. It's not centrally located to somebody who's in the far northwest, or who's on the west side, has to cross the bridge and maybe doesn't have the time. Maybe their job schedules don't afford it. We need to make accessible engagement, and I really mean accessible government, because there's engagement that can happen at the board members visiting schools, visiting community centers, visiting places, but we need to actually make our policy making accessible to people. And we need to, like Carlos said, open up the gates of government to people who are not English speakers, open up the gates of government to people who have a voice, but in general don't trust us to listen to them, so that they don't even participate. And I think there's a level of engagement that includes be willing to meet people at where they're at, rather than us setting a bar and telling everybody, oh, come on, we're open government. That's not open government. Open government is actually meeting people where they're at.
Thank you all again so much for responding so thoughtfully to the question. Our next question is, over the years, SPPS has rolled out many new plans and initiatives that are managed by district staff, as we heard from our current candidates. Often there are minimal updates, sometimes only by posting information on the SPPS website. This has played a huge role in creating distrust between the community and our district. What does it look like for the board to hold the district accountable in making progress towards these goals? And how can this process be used to repair that broken trust that has occurred?
Okay, I have a question before I answer. what are the goals? Or is it just a shot? Okay, I'll just maybe issues toward these issues.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Um, yeah. I'm gonna pass for now. Come back to me.
Sure. I want to share something, which is, I currently have a job in the corporate world. Previously, I worked as an enrollment manager for Oakland Unified School Districts way back when I lived in Oakland, California. One of the training materials that I recently went through was very eye-opening. And mind you, a lot of the training materials in the corporate world are very, very specific to the corporate world. They don't have any application at all in the education world. But I was very interested in this one because it's really about leadership. The book is called The Speed of Trust. And it's very common in the corporate world, training leaders. Speed of trust is actually the core concept is simply your initiatives and your movement as an organization will only go so fast as the trust that you've built allows. We have a very, very broken trust in our district right now, and we cannot move right now. All of our initiatives are literally thrown onto the laps of an administrator in the central office. They're told you need to deliver on this. Then they're essentially thrown to have to deliver, but they can't because there is no trust. We currently, anything that comes out from the district right now, everybody kind of raises their hackles. I believe that we need to take a stop. We need to stop with all the initiatives, and it doesn't mean that we stop educating. So this is very, very clear for all of us who are non-educators in the room. We may have initiatives that are very good. The thing is, our teachers are already educating our students. That an initiative not coming out doesn't mean that our teachers are not educating our students. What we need to do is we actually need to spend a really good amount of time and energy and repairing trust. And it starts with the board. It does start with the board because we are the leaders of the district. We need to instruct and repair trust with our central administration. We need to repair trust with our school administration. We need to build communities of trust, leadership teams at each school that are robust and strong. And I want to be clear, not all of our schools are in the same level in terms of well-developed leadership teams. And it has nothing to do with our skills and with our capacity and with our desire. It has to do with the central support. Some schools are barely struggling to make ends meet because they're overwhelmed with so many other issues. And unfortunately, it's not a measurement of success, it's a measurement of poverty. And so we are literally telling schools, oh, well, you don't have a strong leadership. You should trust us to, take this initiative and run with it. But the truth is that we need to actually stop. We need to build our trust. Then we can actually listen to what the school needs are. True accountability comes from when the community decides together what they need, and then we help them get to complete those goals. So in a certain way, it kind of goes back to the first question, which is, what are the goals? The goals ultimately are going to be driven by the school communities because they know what's best for them. It doesn't mean that we say, oh, well, this school doesn't have, excellent goals. Everybody's going to have excellent goals. The question is, do we actually listen to them? Do we listen to the schools? Do we listen to the teachers? Do we listen to the parents? Do we listen to community members who are invested in those school communities? How do we link up, in very much the vein of Carlo, linking up community-based organizations? How do we link up those strengths and build up together? That's what I see as accountability. And really the accountability comes from the board asking the hard questions and ourselves starting to do the work of building trust between us as board members. And, and I say this as in a future tense, if we're elected, it would be a community work together, and then it would lead to the administration doing the same thing. Now, what happens when you change the environment and suddenly toxicity goes down? Toxic people will either change themselves or they'll want to leave. And that's the truth. Whenever there's a change like that, the people either have to make a choice. I want to stay here. I'm going to become open, transparent, accountable. I'm going to become trustworthy. Or do I want to do what I'm doing now in another place? And that's ultimately what's going to happen.
Yeah, I will just say I agree with a lot of what you said, Yusuf. So thank you. I think, yeah, leadership matters. I think if you have leadership that is able to inspire, motivate, and continue to keep folks involved, right, then the school culture and community doesn't have to necessarily spend time fighting with administration to say, like, this is how we're going to move forward on this. Like, if we're actually in lockstep in making sure that happens, that frees us up, right, to really do some of the other work. And so I will just emphasize that. I will also say that, and I mentioned this point too, but like really looking at localizing that decision-making point, right, where it's like, how do we really utilize our school communities that exist in every different school building that we have and allow them to really to lead in that. I would say, and then I'll just emphasize again, is that like it is the board's responsibility to ask these questions. It's our responsibility to ensure we get responses to these questions and that we're not having the conversation behind closed doors because it might be messy. Right? Like these questions, like when folks can see the transparency that we're working towards something, right? You could ask and actually not exactly know, right? Like, well, what initiatives are you doing that are actually like trying to promote positive school climate and culture right now? Because that is a conversation that continues to come up, right? And it's like a lot of times we try to put the band-aid fixes on them, right? Like real transactional, but like if we actually invested in the restorative practices program, like I know has been successful in other spaces, right? But I know that I left at Humboldt in 2021, that program is like very small now, right? Like, and actually, I don't know that the folks that are leading in that work have been provided opportunity to be trained in that restorative practices, right? And so like if we're having those conversations on a public forum of like what has worked, what steps we're actually taking, and not just in a PowerPoint that exists at the board meeting when it's like sandwiched between a facilities update and and a budget update, and like in between we might talk about, so I think it goes back to like the structure of the agenda. What do we talk about at the board meeting? What is it that we're pushing out, and then what does that post-board meeting or pre-board meeting look like, right? Like what are the ways? And I think I appreciate all these questions because they all kind of just like come together in the sense that it like is really epicenter of centering around community, right? And like how do we actually be intentional with that? And to Erica's point, I really appreciate you saying this, but it's not a checkbox, right? Because that's how a lot of folks feel, is like, oh, you got my input once, and like I filled out the survey. But then it's like, you invited me in at step 6, but step 1 through 5, when we created this process, was the most important. And having that conversation on a public forum, again, like getting those things documented so that way we can ask those questions back. And if I don't get a response, I will tell you from a management lens, from a leadership lens, it's like my responsibility to then follow back up on a public forum to make sure that I'm getting that response and the public is getting that response, because that is what we need. So yeah, I will also just say, looking at how we're hiring and recruiting folks, right? Like how do we bring people in and compensate them a fair wage, right? That they can come in and do some of this work in our community? How do we grow our own program where our young people may see themselves as educators in our buildings, which we do have, a lot of folks, alumni that come back into our spaces. And that's an immediate trust level, because these are folks that have been in community and they're working in partnership with all the other educators in the space. And so I want to make sure I'm mindful and give Erica time as well. So I'll pause and I'll pass it over to you, Erica.
Thank you, Carla. All right, so I'm just gonna add under what it looks like for the board to hold the district accountable is making sure that the district has in place a good plan for equitable engagement and communications, right? Because that's going to be like the crux of making sure that we are engaging in the way that we really need to engage, and also that we are prioritizing relationship building in that process. If we're in Carla mentioned restorative practices, so how does the board and the district practice model restorative practices with each other, right? So that's another thing. And just being transparent in how can we repair trust is by being transparent in the process. Like from step one into all the way to the end, which can be hard sometimes, because sometimes people don't want to be transparent when they don't really know what's going on, and they don't want to look incompetent. And that's something that people have to work through, like kind of on a personal level or as a group. But you have to be transparent throughout the process so people understand, where you're coming from, how you got, where you're going, and how you got there in the middle. And that's how you build buy-in or build trust for what it is that you're doing. Because even if people don't necessarily agree with it, if they understand the process, then they're much more likely to maybe not agree with you, but trust that you are doing the right thing or the best thing that you can do based on with what you have, and that you've been transparent throughout the entire time.
And not asking for that rubber stamp, right? Like at the ends or at step 6, right? Like I think like there's a lot of that happens just in community work in general. But like being transparent in the process is definitely the way, and bringing folks into every step of the process and that real partnership. I appreciate that.
The only thing I'll add there is that typically takes more time. And that's typically the argument. Well, it's going to take too long, or it's going to take an extra this amount of time. And it's like, yes, do you want to do this right, or do you just want to do it now? Right?
Yeah.
It's the
And
time.
it's like if that's just the way that we operate, right? Like if that's just the way that we operate from a school-based level, right, and from a district-wide level, then we could see, then it's like once we can build that infrastructure of like that there are specific folks and that's just the way that we move, then it could be less hard, and it will be hard at the beginning for sure.
And it's interesting because it becomes hard at the beginning, but I think we'll actually be better. We'll be energized. How happy do you feel when you go to work, when you know you're going to be in an environment of fear, in an environment of potential, retribution for saying the truth, for saying what you think is happening, versus a place where you go to knowing that, hey, I can be transparent. I have these needs. Help me, please. And we'll listen, and we want to help you, and we want you to succeed, and we want everybody around to succeed. We want the superintendent to succeed. We want his executive team to succeed because they want their reports to succeed, and everybody wants all educators to succeed. It's kind of like a different mindset where, yes, there's going to be maybe more work, but I think because it's energizing, it'll be less stressful.
And we have a little extra time because we started a little early. And this question, it's just really giving us some good points and discussions. And so we're going to extend the time a little bit. So please feel free to jump in and add more.
Lovely. I was just waiting for Mercedes to come off mute and get the update. Yeah, I think this is a great conversation, right? And I think these are the conversations that need to continue to happen, right? Like outside of just a structured forum. And it's really digging into address some of the biggest challenges that come up within our space.
Yeah, I'm looking at the whole, the idea of transparency and accountability. I mean, they're very linked together. You can't have accountability without transparency. An opaque district is not accountable, and an accountable district has to be transparent. So while they're very linked, I think it absolutely starts with the board. And the board needs to, like, I think the cool thing about the board is people come in from very different backgrounds and very different experiences, different growth experiences and different professional backgrounds. And we can leverage that, common knowledge, common expertise to be able to ask questions within ourselves. But then the interesting thing is it's not limiting it at the board, because I think right now what happens is a lot of the conversations and ideation gets limited at the board level, when actually we need to include outside voices and that are from St. Paul, that have a lot of expertise and have a lot of community engagement, knowledge and wisdom. And that elder wisdom is what we need as a board to be able to succeed. Otherwise it's just more initiatives, like the question said, we just drop all these initiatives on top of each other and they just continually fail. And it ultimately, I feel sad for the people who are holding these initiatives, because it's just a very defeating environment to live in when you're given a task and you can't accomplish it because there's no trust, but you yourself can't move the needle. We all need to move the needle together.
Can I also just say that I think one of the things that I know just in community building in general is that we need to celebrate the wins, and we need to celebrate the bright spots, and we need to celebrate the really dope things that are happening. Because what I know is that there are young people graduating from all of our secondary schools that are graduating from St. Paul College or another 2-year university with their associate's degree before they even graduate with their high school diploma, right? Like, I recognize that there was a honors concert down at the Ordway this last week that we had, we're celebrating artistic abilities, that we have, athletic programs that are just out really, doing really well. And we have young people participating in this, and we have young people leading in a lot of different initiatives and different internships and different ways in community. And I think really telling the story of what is going on in our district gets missed because we tend to focus on the really challenging things. I know that there's a time at the board meeting, right, to really highlight the work of students and staff, and and we don't do enough of that, and we don't do that publicly enough, because there are 4 finalists from SPPS at the for the teacher of the year, right? And I think really being clear on these pieces and celebrating the achievements and accomplishments of our young people in our community, I think could go a long way in also restoring that trust and allowing them to tell the story, which I don't think happens enough or in some of our spaces. Some of our folks do a really good job, right? Our educators get to share their stories, and I know they're telling stories to their people, right? And it has to be broadcasted on a wider scale of the really good things to honor the work that's happening in our district.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add, because we're almost out of time, that it is up to the board to be more engaged into the community. We are literally representatives of the community. We were elected, the board is elected to be that, right? So it's really the responsibility of the board to make sure that they are engaged in community, bringing up the concerns and finding out the concerns of the community, what it is that they like, what it is they don't like, what they want to see, what they like, what they're seeing that they don't like, right? And I think the board, I know the board is in that way responsible and should be accountable to the community, because that's why it's here. I think that also that should be one of the main entryways for parents too, because parents are voters, parents are parenting, parents are communicating with the teachers, parents are communicating with the district in other ways, and other staff members that are maybe not teachers, but our staff members, who knows, in the kitchen, you know, doing janitorial, just people that say hi every morning. So I really think that, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about, more than anything, just being transparent, making sure that we have consistent and accessible communication both ways. And
Erica, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make sure to give you all a chance to have time for the last question.
okay, y'all know where I was going.
I know you're the last one, so that like the last person always like that time is like, it's going so fast. Thank you again for all just the insight that you're providing. I mean, I'm seeing in the comments, people are really excited to hear that our school board candidates are sharing all these amazing ways to engage community. The fourth question is, board members are elected to be a voice and an advocate for our community, which includes, but is not limited to, our students, our families, our family members, our building staff, and our city residents, as they oversee the district and provide direction for the superintendent, which is much broader than simply monitoring test scores and graduation rates. We know our students are more than just a number. Board members are often dissuaded from taking a more active role. How can the incoming board of 2024 take a more active role? What does it look like when community has a board deeply engaged in the work of the district?
So I want to talk about this. It's a very common thing that I've experienced in different board settings, and you know, in this board, and the one that I participated in 2021, the school board members sometimes have uneven engagement. You know, you could say interactions, and even definitions of what engagement means. We might have different understanding of that. I'll be honest. I have a tendency to engage with people that I'm most comfortable with, and so and I learned a lot in the 2021 experience that engaging with people that were far away from my sphere of understanding and influence helped me comprehend a little bit more about, you know, the reality of their situation and their school, that in a specific community. So I think there needs to be a concept that the school board needs to operate as a whole unit and engagement, and in terms of role activity. So if our role is to be the voice, advocate, the direction of the school district, I want to emphasize this concept of unity. And I think we've touched on it earlier in previous questions, the thought of, you know, creating a cadence, creating a framework, creating essentially a new set of ground rules upon which the board can operate as such. Honestly, I feel like right now, the board seems to be compressed into a couple of meetings a month where the business is rapidly presented by the administration, and most of the conversation is really directed by the administration. I think we need to flip our perspective on how governance happens right now, and we need to bring it from the bottom up. And the idea is that yes, there is going to be a meeting for business. Yes, we're still going to have to talk about all the things that we legally are required to talk about. But the important thing is that we need to open an avenue for us to be able to be that voice of the community, of even people who are not directly related to schools, you know, our city residents, because guess what? They still vote us in. So, you know, there is a relationship there to be had. And I want to come back to your experience as educators. How do you feel when all of a sudden the board member shows up at your school? And honestly, you know, from my interactions with my wife, it's always been a little stressful. What is the board member going to find? What is the superintendent going to find when they show up at the school? Are we devoting resources really to make ourselves look better for them when they show up, because there's a fear of what's going to happen if, you know, things are not perfect? And then it makes me think, like, what kind of a relationship is that? Is that what we want as a district? Do we want to be under this constant stress and fear that the board member is going to come and see that, oh, you know, this kid's running in the hallway, or there's something, you know, going on that's a little out of control? The truth is that we need, as a board and a superintendent too, and his administration, they need to see the truth and they need to be okay with it, because guess what? They're responsible for it as much as we all are. And they have to share in that responsibility, and they have to share in that accountability. And I think there's a little bit of a flipped, you could say, relationship right now, where there's this fear, there's this wariness, there's this stress that comes with those interactions. We need to change that. We need to have a very open, transparent relationship that we can instruct our administration to be real with our schools, and to be listening to them, and to be actually helping them succeed. So I definitely feel like we want to have a relationship where our interactions with our educators and our school communities are a relief and not necessarily a source of stress. Hard conversations, yes. Will I be sad at times? Absolutely. Things happen in a school district that are not perfect. And we are interacting with a very, very difficult situation right now, post-COVID, where a lot of students are struggling and a lot of families are struggling. And we need to be realistic about that at the same time that we celebrate our wins, like Carlos said. And I absolutely appreciate that, because we have to hold both, at the same level in our hearts. And we need to be able to equally own our heartbrokenness and our celebration at the same time. And we need to do it in a healthy way. And we need to help our administration be healthy at the same time. And I think it's a lot of work. Like Erica said, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be good work, the kind of work that you like to go to, rather than the one that you dread to go to, because there's going to be tension and fear. And that's what we want to dispel, I think.
I was gonna give Erica, because I know you got cut off of the last question, so I wanted to see if you wanted to go, and then but if not, I can jump in.
Yeah, I can go. So I guess I'm looking at the question as, what does it look like for the board to be deeply engaged in the work of the district, right? So what does it look like for us to have stronger relationships with the district? Like actual relationships, not just like working relationships. What does it look like for, well, it looks like more work. Okay, and I'm just gonna say that. I'm on a couple of boards. One of them is a working board. So with the working board, we don't have a lot of staff, and so the board does work. We volunteer for events. We do community engagement. We show up to help out. We are involved in like the creation of flyers and things like that. Like we're working too. So what would that look like for the board, right? And I don't know like what the separation of like powers look like, in that relationship, as far as how closely we could work with the district on certain things. But I think I would be down for it, of course, but I just have a lot of questions like around capacities for board members, how much time that would add, kind of what things look like right now as far as capacity. Like, are we already over capacity with the things that we do and how they're being done? If we would need to change some things to be able to make this happen in a effective and healthy way, right? Because I think it should happen, but we just have to be mindful of like all the things that come with it, right? So yeah, Carlo.
Cool. Yeah, no. So I think there is one thing I see Julia's comment in the chat about not fearing board members showing up at the school and expected, and I appreciate that, because I would as a potentially incoming board member want to spend time in the schools as much as I possibly can. I will also just share that I just subbed actually not too long ago, about 5 weeks ago at one of our schools, because I want to stay connected to what's going on in the schools. And when I left in 2021, I felt guilty because there was like, like hiring shortages and there was subs in the building. And I recognized that when I signed up on a Thursday at 8 p.m., there was still, over 100 vacancies for the next day in the district. And so like, I want to be able to continue to show up and know what's going on in our schools, because that's what's going to guide our work. That's going to guide our priorities. That's going to guide our goals. I will also say that I spend a lot of time in community. My day job working with the city of St. Paul allows me to work across the entire city. I have worked with young people in every single neighborhood in the city of St. Paul. I volunteer as a coach in community. I've led a nonprofit sports organization that serves young people, over 800 young people, the Westside Boosters. You see me rocking in the background, but that serves over 800 young people and brings together, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of community family members. And we're just in community. I grew up in a family that was in community and showed up to all the events and hosted a lot of the events. And like knowing what it means to have a beat of like what folks in community are experiencing to move into a governance stance, I think can really be transformational in the way that we are able to lead our district. Being a former SPPS student, right, graduated in 2013, recognizing what exists in our buildings, how do we continue to partner with that to make that happen? But I mean, I've also somebody who is busy and has looked at capacities and looks at, to make this work the most effectively, having to dial back on some other commitments to ensure that I can, provide the ample conversation, the ample time in these spaces in order to truly understand what is continue to go on. And I will say that has to exist, right? And recognizing also that it's a snapshot, right? Like being there for one day is only a snapshot of what you see in terms of what happens in that building on a regular basis, but really getting some of those snapshots across the district, we can really hone into what the differences are in every space, having the conversations, building the relationship with the staff. And also as somebody who worked in the buildings as a restorative practices coordinator, having that lens on it from a student lens, a staff lens, and somebody who was also on the executive board of SPFE, having these different intersections and these lenses to like actually make these informed decisions and know how to navigate these systems to truly represent the folks that we're here to represent. And I am unwavering in that commitment. I'm unwavering in the way that I get things done, and really unwavering in the questions that need to be asked on a public forum to ensure transparency and accountability is had. And it's informed again by the work that we're doing on the grounds. And I will also say to this point that I think that there's a need as we look at the budgeting and how we're responsible and including community in that process as well, which I don't think we necessarily talk to a bunch in this conversation, because typically we get proposed the budget and then 10 days later or less than that we're expected to vote on it, which should not be the case, right? However, I will say that it also takes us partnering better with the city of St. Paul. It takes us partnering better. Well, I say all three of the entities that exist, or I would even add the state in here, right? The state of Minnesota, the county, so Ramsey County, the city of St. Paul, and in the school district. And I know between the school district, the county, and the city, we're rocking with about $3 billion in budget. Right. And like, how can we really assess how we streamline support services, how we provide those things? And so like really being a leader and advocating at all those levels, but then also at the state to ensure that our legislative priorities get met, that we can continue to fight for what that looks like on a state level to make sure that this cross subsidy that there's the proposals at the state to hopefully to provide more resources into our district for special education, for EL, that could free up some of the general fund dollars to really invest in what it means to have more robust engagement. And so I will pause there, and I'll pause there.
I wanted to thank you for sharing that. That's really cool, Carlo, and it kind of inspires me to think about, you know, all the different possibilities that a board has to be able to actually make real change instead of actually just kind of being led through like a channel of initiatives that have already been preset by the admin. I think it's kind of like changing that conversation of saying, hey, we do have expertise, we do have the capacity to do good for St. Paul. We just, you know, we just need to actually create the avenues for listening and the avenues for action. I think there's a couple of questions, or one thing that, you know, we mentioned about the budgeting process. There is a strong currently there's a really strong dictation coming from the administration about how do you spend your dollars, how you use your PLC time, how how you're supposed to do things, what exactly are you spending your time in. And unfortunately, it stems from, I think, this distrust that exists. You know, there's this distrust of our educators that is, I think, unfortunately, you know, predicated on some very false pretenses. And we need to dispel that as a board. We need to actually have our administration allow school communities to decide what is the best investment for our dollars. Can we hire this person that we need is going to help us transform our school community rather than force us? Why is that why does that pre-K classroom moving away from us when it actually feeds into our enrollment? You know, let's have conversations about what does sustainable enrollment mean, and how do we build sustainable schools that don't need to, you know, close in an X amount of years when there was, you know, a decade plus of attempted conversations and the district never had them. You know, and I do want to respond to Julia. I love it. You want the board members should be visiting at school districts. And then Chris said, wish we saw board members on our school. The thing is, right now, the way that board members access schools is just a phone call. Hey, come over and to this event. Some educators weren't even aware that that was the case. And, you know, I would love for everybody to have equitable access to governance. And that's what we need. We need to be able to create a cadence so that we know, or a school knows, hey, they can come to us. And we don't have to fight for this resource that exists there. We're not as a board, we should not be a finite resource. We should be available to all in many, many ways. And I think, you know, the ideas that have been spread in this conversation are just like, just a great start to be able to think about what the possibilities are for our district and for our city. So I'm, first of all, very, very inspired by Erica and by Carlo and by all of you, you know, and your presence here and your support.
Thank you. All right. I'm just gonna add that I think that y'all talked about a lot. So I think I'm just gonna focus on just talking about values, right? When it comes to budget, outcomes, like all these things, engagement, right? It really should be led by the shared values of the community and the district and the board, who represents the community, and making sure that everything aligns. So as far as the budgeting, what I like to do is say, okay, let's look at this budget and let's look at our values. Do these things match? If they don't, then we need to change it, right? I know what you think we should be doing, but if we're not leaning into our values, we're not gonna get out of it what we need to get, right? And it's not gonna align. People are not gonna be happy with it. And so we need to go back and take a look at this again and make sure that everything aligns with our values, right? Which people, it's easy sometimes to collect values and figure out what they are and then put them on a sheet of paper or online and say, hey, these are our values. But it's not as easy to refer back to them through everything that you do and make sure that it all aligns. That's the part that gets lost a lot of times, right? And so your values should be the filter through which you do all of your planning, all of your work, all of your budgeting. as far as like deep engagement in the work of the district for the board, I think that at a high level, because of the limited amount of time that the board has to be deeply engaged, I think it would make sense to identify where in the district it would make sense for the board to be the most deeply engaged, right? And focus on building that relationship and building that process. Showing up at schools, that's a form of engagement, but that's not deep engagement, right? That is relationship building though. And that's a good thing.
Out of time. I'm so sorry, Erica. I didn't have to cut you off again. I feel like that's been my like role the last two questions, but thank you again so much. It was truly like, honestly, as a teacher, I feel really inspired that you all are candidates. And just again, the comments I think speak for themselves. People here are very excited for everything you've shared. I'm going to pass the mic back over to our chair, Annika, to have her close out for today.
Sure. Before I do, so for the closing, we would like to give each person just 1 minute per candidate to make a closing statement, anything you want to say. If it's okay with you, I will time that minute, Lynn, unless you want to, I will time that minute myself to make sure that we end on time. And then also Uriah, if you would like 1 minute to do a closing statement, we appreciate your participation in this conversation. So if there's anything that you've heard or that you want to bring back up again, I want to give you a minute to do that if you would like also. And then I'll close this out. So 1 minute to start, if it's okay. Carlo, would you mind having your 1 minute first?
I'm ready. So no, thank you. I had the opportunity to share a lot about my backgrounds and why I am kind of running for school board here. I think that I just want to share and highlight a couple more things is that like from being somebody who is a product of St. Paul Public Schools, has seen a lot of the really bright spots as somebody who is a first generation college graduate from the University of Minnesota from my immediate and extended family. There is a lot of reflection that happens. How do we get to the places that we're at? How do we partner? How do we utilize the resources that exist? I have spent all of my adult life as a public service employee. I have committed my time, my energy to ensuring that our public services are quality, and that we can continue to expand on those. I think that it also makes, I appreciate SPFE and the advocacy that you all do around making sure that our young people are taken care of, that our educators, both licensed and non-licensed, are taken care of. And I think we really have to honor that, and we have to find a way. And I have experiences in community building and organizing and what that.
Thank you, Carlo. I'm going to have to cut you off right there. Thank you so much. So I should have given you a list. If it's okay, we'll go to Yusuf and then go to Erica and then go to Uriah. Yusuf, go ahead.
Sure. I just want to start by acknowledging something. When my wife arrives from a day of teaching, I see her carrying pretty heavy emotional and systemic burdens. And I sense that many, if not all of our educators right now are coming home carrying similar burdens. Each one of you carries a unique burden, but this burden is also collective. Our leaders in our society can no longer brush the true needs and this crisis under the rug. We need to create a culture in the district where the administration and district staff care for our educators in the same way that you guys care for our students. So I just wanted to say our board needs to change and our administration needs to change. And today I want you to know that with your help, we will transform SPPS to be a place where we integrate our stated values and our actions, where the board and administration will be focused on success by being transparent and accountable, not by imposing objectives from the top down, but by listening, learning, and supporting our schools, devoting resources and support to your actual needs. So thank you, SPFE, and I hope to see you, as we continue this process.
Thanks, Yusuf. Erica.
All right, thank you. I just want to thank you for having this panel and for everybody that joined us. I really like meeting people, so I'm happy to meet all of you. This was a good conversation. Thank you to all the teachers that I am in a relationship with at my schools, especially the ones who I call all the time to help me learn new math when I'm helping my kids, because I'm like, I don't remember this. And what are these boxes? I don't get it. But so I understand like how much work it is and how much our teachers love our students. I talk to them all the time. And I just want to make sure that we are valuing all of us as we do our work, from teachers to district staff to parents to our kiddos, of course. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Uriah, it's your turn.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming out today. And I love the conversation. I thought this was amazing. And thanks for inviting me to talk about what's been going on with SOFG. I don't think that, I think it's being pushed back a bit, and I don't think it's a final conversation yet. So I guess I would encourage people to keep paying attention at this BOE meeting and like next month's committee of the board and Board of Education meetings. Also, heads up, I might be like a little less attentive next month because my wife and I are about to have our first child, which is super exciting. But we need help, like making sure we're looking at how things are going with the board and the next month. So make sure you're keeping an eye on things and making sure that like the board is proceeding in a way that makes sense for our community.
Thank you, Uriah. Thank you so much. So I have some thank yous, and I also have homework. So we're educators here. So, we talk about homework sometimes. I apologize in advance. Uriah, sorry, I really want to thank you for coming and sharing information about what's been happening. I know you've learned about this a lot. People on the board have all been learning about it. And for all of us who haven't been there, it's really helpful to hear your summary of what's been going on, about what the discussion has been. I really want to thank our candidates for coming. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Yusuf. Your expertise, your experiences, your ideas, your hopes and dreams for our district. It was really a great conversation and really motivating for all of us to hear. And I also really want to thank you for running. Running for office is a huge job. And I know it takes a toll on your life, your family. But it's really important that we have people running for school board who care about our students and our schools. So thank you so much for doing that. And also thank you to everyone who's here participating in this conversation, because this is really an important part. If we want a board that engages with community, it makes a big difference to have people showing up for these conversations. So I also want to encourage everybody who's in this meeting to share the video. So Lynn is going to, once she knows the video worked and has it downloaded, she will share it on the SPFE Facebook page, and you are welcome to share it with anyone you want from there. Also, she posted a form in the chat where you can share your thoughts, your input, your questions, and we will collect those, and we will also share those out with the candidates who participated. So please do those things. And if it's okay, I would also like to encourage everyone in here to engage with the candidates, both the candidates who are here, candidates who are not here. I'm seeing nods from some candidates that they are in support of that. So that would be my other homework for anyone, is to continue following up, continue these conversations, continue asking questions, because that's how we can make really good decisions about what candidates we want to support, as well as the most important thing, which is to affect the conversations that are happening at the school board, and hopefully help our board to reflect the schools we really want to have. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for coming, and hope you have a great Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.